Hello and welcome to Standard Sports Ashes coverage. We are now 2 days out from the start of the series, and I'm joined by our cricket correspondent, Will Macpherson, who's on the ground in Australia. Will, you've been out there about a week now, is that right? Give us sort of a little précis of what it's like out there, the atmosphere. Is Ashes fever setting in?
Belatedly, I think people have realised the Ashes are starting. It's a bit strange. I'm in Sydney, and you come to Sydney in December, and you expect the sun to be shining every day, but that is very much not happening at the moment. The weather across Australia, or at least in the relevant bits for this Ashes series, seems to be a bit drab, I suppose. They've had a lot of rain up in Brisbane. That massively disrupted England's build-up, is making preparing a pitch quite difficult. All those kind of things. The weather down here is not quite as bad, but it's still not great. It's probably not what I thought I was signing up for.
Well, talking about signing up for, I mean, it's not been the easiest process to sign up for it. You've had to jump through all sorts of hoops just to get out there. Give us a quick summary, really, of what it's been like trying to get down under in the middle of this pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, normally, it's quite easy to get in, go to Australia from the UK, but the pandemic's made that very difficult. They've obviously had quite tight borders since that started. They're beginning to relax in most states, but it's still been a little bit tricky. And the Omicron variant was a kind of last minute curveball as well. But and just like the teams, really, it's been similar. Like they had a lot of discussions about how whether they could get the series on, whether this was an appropriate country to be hosting like a major 3-month event in at this time. And they have, to their credit, they've got it on. There's still a lot of uncertainty around. That's one of the things about this series, even just 2 days out from the first test. There is, today they announced that the 5th test won't be happening in Perth as it's always been scheduled to. It's going to move to probably Hobart or Melbourne's probably the favourite, but Hobart, Cricket Australia quite like that idea as well. There's a bit of suggestion that Adelaide, which is the next test, the second test, could close its borders. Queensland is currently got its borders closed where Brisbane is. That's why I'm not up there. It's not easy to get into Brisbane. But they're very kindly going to open the borders the day after the test match, which is, of course,
I did see that. Ideal.
Not perfect, but yeah, it's great to be here, and the series is finally around the corner. I think it's a series that at times this year I didn't necessarily think it would happen, but we're here, and that is great.
I mean, you mentioned the build-up there. Obviously, it feels like a while ago now that they did confirm that the series was going to happen. I mean, since then, we've had all sorts of other things. We've had the T20 World Cup. We've had the Yorkshire races and stuff over here. We've had Tim Payne over there. It's been a strange build-up. And then, of course, the weather. No one's really played any cricket. Do you think we're going to see that have a big impact on the series? Is it going to take a while to catch fire, or will it be sort of all right on the night?
It has been the strangest Ashes build-up in history, I would say. The T20 World Cup, as you mentioned, was the first reason it was a bit odd. The teams have actually only been all together for a week, which is remarkable. Normally in the Ashes, England spend a month out here before they play 3 decent standard games of quite competitive cricket to decide who's fit and do it properly. Instead, they were quarantining in 2 different groups: the group who'd been at the T20 World Cup and the group who hadn't. The group who had been there included the head coach, Chris Silverwood, so they've only had access to their head coach for a week, and then 5 players as well. Throw into the mix the fact that both nations, the cricket culture in both nations is battling major scandals. We've obviously had the racism story that's engulfed Yorkshire and taken in a couple of other counties, and just generally the whole English game, to be honest, in England. And then Australia, was it 17 days out from the Ashes or something, maybe 19 days out from the Ashes? They lost their captain, Tim Payne, who got himself in trouble for sending some sort of naughty pictures and texts a few years ago. So they've got a new captain, Pat Cummins. They've got a new wicketkeeper, Alex Carey. So, there's quite a lot of unknowns there for them. And then, as you say, that the 2 teams haven't played any cricket. Australia have basically given up playing cricket since the pandemic began. They don't really go overseas very much. They haven't played an away test for more than 2 years. They've only played 2 test matches this year, and the last one was in January. So they're going to be pretty rusty. England are going to be rusty as well. At least Australia have home advantage. England have got 10 players on their first Ashes tour. They've had 2 days effectively. They were meant to have 7 days of warm-up cricket. They ended up having 7 sessions, which is just not ideal at all. So Stuart Broad, England fast bowler, said that both teams, no cricketer could claim that they were ready for this series, and he's probably right. I think it will be a bit rusty on Wednesday. There's a bit of rain forecast again, so they might get an extra day's rest, which would be interesting. But yeah, I think it is a bit of a standing start, and everyone will be slightly wary of injuries and lack of form, and it's all just a bit of guesswork.
That first test gets underway, as you say, on Wednesday at the Gabba. I suppose Australia, it's been a bit of a fortress, although of course India did win there, and then that long unbeaten run. England, you feel, probably need to get something out of that game. Potentially a shortened game might help.
I think that's exactly right. I think England would bite your hand off for a draw. They'll obviously be ambitious and say they want to win, and they'll try and follow India's lead after that incredible win there earlier this year. But the reality is England haven't won at the Gabba since 1986. Australia don't lose there very often. Obviously, the Gabba was stormed earlier this year by India, but doesn't necessarily have any bearing on this game, I don't think. The only time England have won in Australia since 86-87 was in 2010-11, and crucially, they made it out of the Gabba alive there. They had a legendary second innings rearguard, 517 for one, and they left Brisbane with a draw and ended up winning the series 3-1. I think if England are to stand a chance here, I can't see them losing the first test and then winning 2 or 3 more to regain the urn. I can't see that happening. I think they have to get out with at least a draw.
Let's talk a little bit about team selection then before we finish. Australia have gone ahead and named theirs early. Whatever you want to read into that about mind games and gaining the upper hand and stuff. England are going to leave it to the last minute, we hear, as they often do. But it's really that number 6 spot that's up for grabs between Ollie Pope and Johnny Bairstow, and then the shape of the bowling attack. I know that they yesterday didn't rule out going without a spinner. I mean, that's not going to happen, is it, surely?
There is a lot of uncertainty about how England are going to set their team up. And as you rightly point out, that is in stark contrast to Australia, who were confident enough to name their team. That they only had a couple of decisions to make. The final seam bowling spot went to Mitchell Starc, and the final batting spot went to Travis Head. Just because they've picked their team early doesn't mean it's a terribly settled side or even a particularly brilliant side. We just don't know much about that team because they haven't played very much this year. And there's quite a few unproven batters. I think England would fancy, if they could get some early inroads and, get bowling at Marnus Labuschagne and Steve Smith, who are both absolutely magnificent players who've caused them problems in the past. But the other batters, I'm thinking Marcus Harris, Travis Head, Cameron Green, Alex Carey. I think England quite fancy that. In terms of England's selection, it is difficult. Ben Stokes' return makes things easier, but the lack of cricket has tilted the dial the other way a little bit because they don't really know what's going on. And then I suspect they are being a little bit confused by the weather in that they think possibly they don't need a spinner. I think they will end up picking a spinner. So they'll have 4 seamers. They'll pick Jack Leach, 4 seamers, including Stokes. And then they've just got to work out with those seamers quite how to balance it. Obviously, they've got 2 who are, old cricketers, you'd say. One of them's 39, Jimmy Anderson, one's 35, and Stuart Broad. They need to get their workloads right, make sure they're fit, and also to make sure that they've got a good attack that suits Adelaide in the second test, which can be a day-nighter. So that's a great opportunity for England. At number 6, there's still a spot to be decided there. I think the top 5 is set in stone. Rory Burns, Haseeb Hameed and David Milan had quite a good time of it at the end of the summer, having come together, a bit thrown together. But I think the 3 of them will see off the challenge of Zach Crawley, who I think played pretty nicely in that warm-up game last week and is considered to be someone who should be quite good in Australian conditions. I'd be very tempted to pick him. I don't think they are. At number 6, it's a shootout between Ollie Pope and Johnny Bairstow. Bairstow's obviously got, 75 or something tests of experience, but he's struggled a bit for a couple of years, 3 years probably. He also brings with him experience of 2 previous tours of Australia, and he is someone who, you know, who's good enough to make an Ashes 100 in Perth 4 years ago, which is, you know, that doesn't, not every Englishman can say that. Pope is the coming man, but he has been for a little while as well. You know, it's 3.5 years since he made his Test debut, and we're still waiting for him to really fulfill that promise. I think my instincts are that they are leaning towards Pope. Bairstow was very much in the box seat last week, but then he had a poor warm-up game. He got out twice for just 11 as the game became a bit farcical. So I think they're leaning towards Pope, who should suit the conditions out here. He's got a great record for Surrey on flat pitches at the Oval. He thrived in South Africa 2 years ago. And I think it's time. They've just got to trust him and get him to show how good he is. So I would like to see that happen. But it's still a bit to be decided. They've got one more training session on Tuesday before the series begins on Wednesday. So they've got a few decisions to make, and they're certainly being very coy.
Well, we're very much looking forward to getting the series underway. As we said, there's been so much going on in the build-up. It feels like the 2019 Ashes feel a long time ago now. So, yeah, it'll be good to get going. We'll be back after the first day's play. We'll review, hopefully, plenty of action, although that'll be weather dependent. And fingers crossed it's not been the disastrous start for England that I'm sure plenty of us are fearing. But as we get closer and closer, convince ourselves won't be in the offing. Cheers, Will. Speak soon.
Cheers, Malik.